Welcome back to Resurrected Rose Petals. Today's episode will be called Know Thyself. The reason I chose this title, Know Thyself, is for the sole purpose that most of us don't. And it's not by coincidence, it is by design. For in the United States of America, we are taught and educated outwardly instead of inwardly. For the word educate is to bring out that which is latent, meaning not developed as of yet. For one is not given education, one is revealed the potential already implanted by the Creator, what is already within him or her from their birth. If we understood the concept that we are only educating ourselves of our potential that we have at birth from our Creator, there would be no reason to have arrogance or ignorance, because we would understand that we possess the omnipotent, omnipresent, and omni-knowing Creator and essence of God within each and every one of us. There would be no issues of low self-esteem. There would be no issues of stress or undervaluing our self-worth if we understood that we are gods. For even your Holy Bible states that ye are gods. But let's get a little deeper into what these scriptures meant before our African ancestors were kidnapped and taken into slavery in the United States of America. For the biblical precepts and concepts in the scriptures were principles that applied to not just one pigmentation, although it started from one pigmentation. For black man and the black woman is the original human species on the planet Earth, which birthed other melanated people into existence on the planet Earth. The problem with that, and the problem with the whitewashing which took place from war and hatred, is that our history was seen as a threat to the new power which came into existence through Europeans. So with that being a threat, all of the precepts and all of the holy books and libraries were burnt down, and here we are. I've covered this in prior videos. I thought that it would be important for me to reiterate that before I went through these slides and showed you guys certain things which highlighted the principles that I'm speaking about. I don't know how many people know, but looking at this slide here, this is a picture of the human cranium. This is the brain within it, and it's 12 pairs of nerves which operate the brain. If you count these, you will see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You will see 11. But if you look it up online, you can Google this information and you will see that there's 12 pairs. The reason the 12th pair of nerves is not named on the operating functions of the brain is because one of those is involuntary. Involuntary because it performs the gestation process of consuming food and physical aspects of the body operating to survive physically. The other aspects that deal with memory, which deals with cognitive thinking, which deals with different electromagnetic functions with the brain, are those which are voluntary, for you can direct the path of those and you can become sharper in your aspect with your growth in your mental evolving as an individual. But with the gestation nerve pairs, it is not listed on here because it is involuntary, because your body thrives on that to survive. And it maintains its functions of the stomach, which you don't tell your stomach how to break down a piece of bread or a piece of meat. It does it involuntarily. You don't direct that. So you have no say-so in that. And if you don't feed that crave, and if you don't feed that hunger pain, which your body is telling you it needs to sustain so that you can exist, you won't have a reason for the other 11 functions to even be in existence, because you won't be here to experience its existence. Now, to correlate this to scriptures, you have 12 disciples which followed Jesus the Christ. Of course, you had one disciple which sold Jesus Christ out, which was Judas Iscariot. He sold him out for pieces of silver. He sold them out for monetary gain. But the reason why he sold them out and then later committed suicide is all metaphysical science and knowledge of a divine aspect. For after Judas committed suicide, there were 11 disciples and one was not. This being an allegorical parallel to the 11 cranial nerves, 11 pair of cranial nerves directly in alignment to the brain and its functions, which all have their respective responsibilities in regulating the brain. But one of those, being of a physical aspect, was parallel with Judas on the physical plane. For it is desires of the lower self which holds an individual back from attaining his spiritual enlightenment. It is the lower self that we must grow over and beyond to attain those certain heights in life that we desire to reach. And first should be your purpose in knowing the God in yourself. Here's an example right before your eyes with the 12 pairs of nerves which operate the brain, being that number 12 lining to the disciples, and also lining back to the 12 tribes, which are a lineage of Jacob, which name was changed to Israel once he received divine enlightenment. Now, one should ask the question, if all of this is an internal story of a spiritual manifestation that takes place in ourselves, why is there so much attention put on the places that these stories were supposed to have taken place? Well, let us first recognize one thing. The person that is the primary figure in the Bible, Jesus the Christ, no one has any historical proof of his existence ever taking place. No burial, no anything. This is because this whole concept was stolen from our African ancestors with he ruled the Christ, or the lighthouse, the principle which emanated the light of truth from the essence within the human mind. This was a principle. But also, make no doubt about it, when our ancestors correlated this knowledge from an internal spiritual development, they knew all about maintaining an empire and a kingdom because they were regulating one themselves. The African kingdoms emanated from Africa all over the world, which is why we have things such as the Aztecs, which is the native race or ethnicity of humans on the United States of America soil before it was the United States of America and before they were invaded by the Europeans, which formulated the United States of America. What many may not know is the pyramids and the different structures and monuments that have been discovered in the lands of America are merely descendants of our African ancestors from Africa, which were Africans. When there were mixing of certain races, which causes the pigmentation or melanin to lesser to lighter hues of melanated people, and there is an historical whitewashing and deprivation of a people due to slave trade, businesses being formed, then there will never be a correlation of who those people were before that took place, when there is a systematic design in place for the people who are being enslaved to not know who they are. So before we're told that we were already in the United States of America, we will first be told that the people who set up the villages and culture before slavery were still either directly tied to those enslaving us or had nothing to do with us in the first place at all. Not only that, we have no recollection or no education system purposely not in place to teach us about our ancestors and the kingdoms that they had and how they emanated all across the world in their dominion and power. On top of that, before I continue with these slides, I would like to address that the cosmic bodies make a 363-degree rotation in our cosmic universe, or in our cosmic galaxy, in 26,000 years, which is called the Great Year. In our calendar years, it is 365 and 1/4 days that we formulate one full year. But none of us have a lifespan that grows into 26,000 years for us to see all of the cosmic bodies, that is, the planets, to make a full circumference of a 360-degree cycle of a 26,000 year period of time, because we don't live that long. The problem with that, and the question I pose to you before I continue the slide, is that Europeans, or how is it that Europeans have been only historically known to be in existence for a little over 6,000 years? But they have the information that pertains to a 26,000 year period of time. The reason is because we have been here a tremendously longer amount of time than 26,000 years. And we've watched everything go in a full circumference to be able to document and articulate through divine science and interpretation the reason for things that are in existence, to where we could evolve as a people. But now, since we have been a conquered people, and that is not to say that because we were able to witness this 26,000 year period of time that this was done in one generation of time. This information was passed through lineages of our ancestors over a process of time, and this information was processed and assimilated into symbols and books and an education system and a divine religious education system, which was not like religion today, for it was the way of the culture instead of a place to go outside of the culture, which does not mirror any likeness of God. The culture mirrored the likeness of God because the education system was taught in a godly fashion. Whereas today, everything that is a direct rejection of precepts or commandments of God is taught in the school books, not only from homosexuality, not only from uh, glutinous behavior and conquering crusades, which is Christopher Columbus taking a place in the book as if it was a common understanding and agreement between the native people of this land for him to come and take it, when quite the contrary took place and they were slaughtered through poisonous diseases and to the point where their numbers were almost depleted. There are all kinds of things that our education system puts forth that are of murderous and deceptive means to uphold the powers that be, to be held in favor and to not be looked down on as evil or demonic in nature. When even our babies are taught that the killers got what they deserved. The killers that usurped this land deserved to get what they got because they disarmed and dismantled ethnicity of people, and they were not able to do anything about it. Maybe this is the reason why bullies are in existence in schools today. But to go back to the knowledge being usurped and taken from our ancestors and the whitewashing taking place, and a people assessing our knowledge and the accumulation of our wisdom not being in existence long enough to even watch the cosmic bodies make a 26,000 year great year period. It is equivalent to a child receiving a handgun and pulling the trigger and understanding that their gun can kill, but doesn't understand the significance of the gun and how it's made. This is what we're dealing with today. This is why, for some reason, it's mysterious to some of us that NASA receives so much money to discover and to study the cosmic bodies outside of our Earth's atmosphere. But we don't understand why it is so. Because they are understanding the astronomical knowledge, the astronomy that has now been interpreted into astrology. For astronomy is the study of the heavenly bodies and its parallel connection to our human makeup and our characteristics that we have as individuals on Earth. Astronomy is the study of these things. There are tremendous amounts of money placed in NASA's hands to study these bodies, but we're not understanding why they are in such a despair to study and take off in these rockets out of our Earth's atmosphere to find out what these things are and how they work. This is because they are like the child that I use in an example that is trying to hurry up and find out what this gun is made of before we remember how we put it together and we disarm everything that they have armed themselves with to deceive us. We are reading about the macrocosm of the universe being interpreted into the microcosm, which is man and woman. This is a sacred wisdom, and I am exposing how it was done and how we can return to our divine enlightenment and greatness as an individual. On this next slide, we have the 12 signs of the zodiac. We have Capricorn, Sagittarius, Scorpio, we have Libra, we have Virgo, so forth, so on. I believe you guys may be familiar with the 12 signs of the zodiac. But in the center, we have the cross, which is annually crucified. Many of you may not have never questioned why it is that the Passover changes each and every year. It is because it is the charting of the sun which asserts when the Passover will be. This has nothing to do with the passing over of a Savior or anything of that nature. But when you understand the principles of where this book, the holy books, derive from, I'm speaking on the Holy Bible, where it derives from, then you understand that it is a story about the principles of the S-U-N and not the S-O-N, and its divine nature and its divine connection to the God within us. For the rays of the sun contain electronic, or should I say, the rays of the sun contain electromagnetic signals and radiation that emanate throughout creation to cause it to grow. And when one obtains these lights in a universal nature mentally, he or she can then unlock their pineal gland and secrete the melatonin from the pineal gland to open up their being and to resonate and emanate a light and be a light holder. Then one will be illuminated. But first, one must understand their connection to the universe and to the nature within themselves, and see those things as one. When one arrives to the profound wisdom of enlightenment, to see the universe as one and to understand and acknowledge the God within is the one that exists everywhere, that is omnipotent and omnipresent, then he can walk and fulfill his purpose, or she can walk and fulfill her purpose as a God. The reason the Passover is hidden from us is so that we'll outwardly acknowledge an event or situation that is supposed to take place within us. Why would one make a corporate situation or business out of Easter and out of this Passover? Well, for the obvious reason, monetary gain, to uphold a kingdom, to uphold an empire. For if you are looking for an event to take place outside of yourself, with the sun passing over the equatorial line, instead of looking at enlightenment passing over from your physical or lower self into your spiritual self, taking place over the equatorial line or crossroad of you being a negative or immoral individual, or you being a divine or enlightened individual and making the choice, making the conscious choice to evolve as a person or to decline as a person, then you will understand the choice is yours. But the reason for the monetary and corporate creation of the Passover is so that you'll take the time to pay attention to something outside of yourself and spend your money, of course, your time, on the different traditional aspects that you have to uphold within that society so that your family can fit in with the families of those which have created this culture and this tradition. Once one has spent his monetary gains and his time on upholding a culture that derails himself from evolving, then you can only add to the empire that is suppressing and oppressing your divine growth in you so that they can continue to evolve monetarily themselves. It is all by design. These paganistic holidays have been designed to suppress the evolution of individuals so that they can evolve through monetary gain as an empire over their oppression and suppression of those they want to keep in subjugation, or to keep underneath them so that they continue to keep their foot on the neck of those they don't want to rise. Moving right along to the next slide. On this next slide, we have the 12 signs of the zodiac once again. But this time we have the specific influences on the organs which make up the whole anatomy of the human body. Here we have Aries, which is the head and face, which make up the top tier of the anatomy of the body. Then we have Taurus, the bull, which is the neck. Cancer, which is the breast. Virgo, which is the bowels. We have Scorpio, which is the loins or genitals and rectum. We have Capricorn, which are the knees. We have Pisces, which are the feet. Aquarius, which are the legs. We have Sagittarius, which is the thighs. We have Libra, which is known as the scale because it is the center of the torso at the lumbar. We have Leo, which is the heart, and we have Gemini, which is the arms. Now, our ancestors were most definitely blessed by the divine essence of the Creator to interpret these things into the literary form of speech and through the articulation of signs and symbols. For they understood that each one of these zodiacal signs had a direct influence to different aspects of the body, which is why even till today, certain signs have certain characteristics that you see present in a particular person. A particular person could be a Sagittarius, and something about them being a Sagittarius may directly correlate to an entirely different person with the same characteristics, which may be carried out in a different style or way, but it is no different than the same diamond with a different cut. But it's the same diamond. It's the same characteristics. You have different things that may be said about a Scorpio. Being because it is the genital bladder and the rectum, it's more sexual in nature. You have different aspects with the Aries being the head, more of an analytical person, more of a thinker, more of one trying to organize or figure out how to manipulate something into a certain direction. All of these things are in direct correlation to our astrological bodies or planets in our galaxy. Our ancestors, over a 26,000 year period, which is the great year, figured out how to interpret these things into the spoken word, which became the breath of life because it sustained life on earth in a divine and moral fashion to where we could evolve as a people and build upon those knowledge, wisdom, and understanding precepts as the lineages continue to come into existence over a precession of time. So we were a people who continuously compounded information and passed it on and put it into the scribe's hand to document, and we compounded the information. We compounded that information and continually built on that information. Moving right along to the next slide. The next slide, you guys, is the cross as you know it, but not the cross that you thought. Why do I say that? Is because the cross is only a new symbolism or concept that Europeans put into place when they decided to culturally extract the Ankh, A-N-K-H, from ancient Africa and ancient Kemet and put it to their own cultural aspect. They created the cross. It pretty much has the same meaning as far as dealing with the S-U-N, not the S-O-N, because the S-O-N is something that they did to make a deity or a god out of themselves, which is why they had us Africans in America for 400 years, calling them master. But what I want to talk about is, if you look here, you'll see that each 12 of these disciples have a specific zodiacal sign ascribed to them. You have the sign of Aries as St. Peter. You have the sign of Taurus as St. Simon. You have the sign of Gemini as St. James. You have the sign of Cancer as St. Andrew. The sign of Leo as St. John. Virgo, St. Philip. Libra as St. Bartholomew. Scorpio, St. Thomas. Sagittarius as James. Capricorn, Matthew. Aquarius as Jude. And you have Pisces as Judas. Okay. Now we have those 12, but Jesus Christ in this astrological display of the bodies of planets being the sun. Not the S-O-N, but the S-U-N. Now, I would like to reiterate, make no doubt about it. Our ancestors, when they put these words into translated concepts and symbols, knew all about regulating and running a kingdom. So when these precepts and principles were put into place, they understood how to master themselves as far as their lower selves of gluttonous behaviors or immoral behaviors, and going after, and basically going after the lower desires of things that they wanted outside of the things that they needed with purpose and principle. And they also understood not only how to regulate and govern and master themselves, but also how to run a kingdom. So when you're reading the Holy Bible or any of these holy books that are all derived from the precepts of ancient Kemet, which is known today as ancient Egypt, the reason why these stories with these principles that I'm speaking of as principles are taking place in places is because as we evolve as individuals that apply to principles, a place has to be in existence for you to manifest it. Of course, when you become divine in your individual essence as a man or as a woman, that place or that phenomenon is going to take place of you becoming enlightened in yourself. Make no doubt about it. It is no one else's experience. It is no one else's divine introduction to God but your own. But once that takes place, your journey in life also takes place on earth. Our ancestors understood how to correlate that information from a hierarchy. What does that mean? That means when you're reading about Egypt in the Bible, Europeans took it upon themselves to not correlate what our ancestors were speaking. For when they were speaking from our empire in Africa when we were in reign at that time. When our kingdom was reigning at that time. So of course, they wouldn't call themselves cursed by God. They wouldn't call themselves demonic or evil or not the chosen and all of these things that are going on today. For one would be cursed if God was punishing you, but not eternally. For to fix the wrongdoings of a race of people into an eternal wording in a book that is directly spoken from the word of God, quote unquote, it's the doom of people into servitude forever. And this was the mission of Europeans when they stole this information and these precepts from our ancestors. But this is not so. When we read these concepts and these precepts in proper context, what you will acknowledge and what you will have revealed to you when you read them in proper context is Egypt in the Bible was the superpower of the world. And when it was the superpower of the world, it held the divine enlightenment process of how we were to evolve as humans to become one with the Creator, which made us all. Later, what happened is a decline took place. And when this decline took place, you read about the falling of an empire and the rise of sin and the decline of morality in people. When one decides to not follow the will, WHEEL, and that is the divine will, not the WILL, which is you will do what your master orders you to do, human, which was changed from a divine to a material aspect of flesh to run people's lives and miseducate them. What you learn is that our ancestors learned how to explain to us through the hierarchy of kings and queens to the society of the people, which they had a responsibility to raise up their divinity within them so that they could sit amongst them through a process of evolution of them applying themselves to the initiate process to become divine by their own conscious decision. So, what we had was a kingdom that was in existence that our ancestors were teaching us about and how it came to be. And when they were teaching us these things, there were physical things which took place because they were documenting the growth as it happened over the 26,000 year processional periods of time. And as this time elapsed and these occurrences were taking place in the physical world, they were only mirroring a spiritual manifestation or a spiritual occurrence which had took place within us, which were mirrored in kingdoms and individuals which are known as prophets that took place in the world outside of us. Now, the problem with that is there are two ways and two kingdoms that can be built. There's a kingdom of God that can be built, and it can be built in a righteous manner. And there's a kingdom of man that can be built, and it can be built in a demonic or lower self manner. Meaning you can usurp or conquer people by bloodshed and force and reality to take place that it is inevitable to fall because it is against the principles of the universe. And it is against the principles of the Creator, which created all things within the universe. But then there's the divine creation or the divine kingdom, which will outlast the time or outlast the test of time because it stands with the timeless, which is the Creator. We are reading about Bethlehem. We are reading about Galilee. We are reading about Nazareth. We are reading about Jesus the Christ. We are reading about several prophets, several kings in the New Testament and in the King James version of the Bible, and the King James period, the Bible period, which never took place. These physical occurrences never took place whatsoever. Spiritually, these occurrences can take place in each and every one of us because we all possess the ability to be a king or a queen. We all possess the ability to reach divine enlightenment and understanding, which means that we should not be seeking to be saved from outside, for the Savior that we are awaiting is the divine evolution of ourselves, which saves us from our lower selves and our immoral selves in the mind of each man and woman. The reason why you read the New Testament and Jesus the Christ is called a king, but he has no place on the seat of any throne of any kingdom, is because the kingdom is non-existent. The kingdom, being non-existent physically around him, was existent within him, but not in the world. Because his people had been taken from grace and oppressed and hidden from who they were in a historical sense. So when you're reading about the story of Jesus the Christ, you had people who were aware that he was a divine being that called him a king, but the real king in the false reality that everyone had accepted was the Roman Caesar. And because the Roman Caesar had riches that he had obtained and usurped through bloodshed of building up his kingdom, was the only one that the people in the land respected. Does that mean that Jesus the Christ in the story is a real individual because the Roman Caesar is a real individual? No. Because the divine principle is that which builds or destroys any said kingdom by what it has used to develop its fundamental and foundation aspects of its kingdom to thrive. Just as Rome and its empire was inserted into the Holy Bible, so could Africa and the kingdoms of ancient Africa be inserted into the Holy Bible, and any name of any individual which applied divine principle to themselves be asserted as a prophet in the Holy Bible to break down that said kingdom which had nothing to do with God. For the Holy Book, and the main reason for the Holy Book to be presented to the world, was so that we would understand how to attain the kingdom of God within, so that we could build the kingdom of God in a physical reality. So, our ancestors understood that these precepts were to maintain the empire that they had built, and so that each pharaoh would have to get the same responsibility and uphold the same principles as the pharaoh which came before the present pharaoh reigned at the present time. So it was processional. Each pharaoh had to follow the precepts and the laws and the divine principles of the last pharaoh so that the kingdom could be maintained. This is why when Moses in the Bible was taken amongst the pharaoh, he was learned in all the ways of the Egyptians. And because he was learned in all the ways of the Egyptians, Moses was then able to save all of the children of Israel because he had learned divine wisdom himself. But yet we are taught today that Egypt was a horrible place, and it is a place that has several gods. And we are taught that Egypt is a place that was a pagan place, which didn't know what they were worshiping and had no direction. But Jesus, the Christ, is of direct lineage to the Moses of the Bible, upholding the same principles and the same rules which derived from ancient Egypt that taught Moses, that was passed on to Jesus the Christ. But yet we are learned in the Holy Bible that Egypt is cursed forever, so that we will be slaves forever. This is a whitewashing and a deception and a manipulation. It is a manipulation put forth by Europeans to keep us in subjection to oppression and mental slavery. Now, go to this next slide. I wanted to make sure I made that clear, you know. In this next slide, we have the figure 8. And the figure 8 being the pattern of the sun moving in our cosmos. Now, the sun travels repeatedly in this figure 8. And the reason why this sign is used as an infinity symbol and meaning today in our present time is because it is a fixed pattern that the sun travels. And if God had designed for the sun not to do that, we would not have balance, and some of us would freeze to death. So this pattern is a sacred pattern, which has turned into a sign of infinity today, for it is the travel of the sun through the cosmos, through the zodiacal signs and planets in our atmosphere outside of Earth, which affects our existence as human beings today on this planet. On this next slide, I would like you to look at Konark, which is Konark or Konark, some pronounce it Konark, is the sun temple in India. If you look closely at this picture, you can see that the ancestors of that time went great distances to put a lot of detail into this temple. And if you look here, well, before I go to the slide, because it's a part of that slide, if you look at the bottom, you can see a wheel on the bottom column of the temple. And this is a picture up close of that wheel. And I'm going to put these slides on top of each other right here. If you look, you can see the bottom of this temple. Right here, you see that wheel. This is the wheel on the bottom of that temple, which if I show you up close, you can see that there are the zodiacal signs, which are in that wheel of that temple. So our ancestors knew that this temple was a temple of the sun, S-U-N, where they had erected this temple or set up this temple to exalt the S-U-N so that they could chart the skies and see the signs and symbols of the time and how to direct themselves and what direction they should be traveling to further evolve as human beings and understand the era and the time that they were existing in. Where many of us think just to know the time on the clock on the wall is enough for us to exist and be successful without knowing the time that we exist with God, to manifest our purpose within the time of the day on the clock on the wall. We only know the material time, but we do not know the spiritual time. So we do not know if we are on the midst of falling or we are on the midst of rising. And to put all of this into perspective, what we are, or what I am attempting to bring into the light is the grave miseducation of the black man and black woman in America to look to be saved from outside and not from within. Not have unity amongst our own brothers and sisters to resource and pool the things that we attain in life to become owners and to become communities of grace by God. For we are put into situations by outward entities or outward creations conjured up by Europeans to force us to leave our environments, force us to leave our areas that we occupy, communities that we occupy, and to go to occupying areas that Europeans dwell in with wealth to feel safe, because we don't feel safe within our own communities. And the main reason this exists like this is because of the devalue that we put on our lives. We are being educated to not see ourselves of value. We are being educated to not love our brothers and sisters around us, or to not understand why they are in the ignorant state they are in, which is by design and also through post-traumatic stress syndrome of slavery. For brothers and sisters, not just sisters, but brothers and sisters, were raped in slavery, psychologically driven into dark places, dogged out to the farthest extent, and then released into a bigger environment and playing field in society outside of a yard and a fence, ran by a plantation master into a world with all type of problems, and never giving psychological evaluations or help, when we should be given grants for free psychological evaluations. But this has never taken place, and now it is our responsibility to reevaluate ourselves and our brothers and sisters around us, and to understand why we are in the state we are in. For these precepts that we are reading in these holy books is about the evolution of man and woman within, and creating an empire like we have had in the days of old, and how to sustain that, and how when we decide to go against the will of the Creator, then we will have a king that we won't even know is a king, and doesn't even have an empire or a throne as we do today. This is only the first series of more series to come. And let us return back to recognizing what a king really is. And let us acknowledge what kingdom our kings really had, so we can build that up again. And let us stop embracing false and deceptive places and false and deceptive prophets, which never existed and which will never profit us because they never existed. And then we'll begin to recognize the prophets which really did, because they existed when the kingdom that ruled in the divine rulership, in a divine manner, in ancient Kemet, which is Egypt today, ran the entire world. Until next time on Resurrected Rose Petals, I'll see you on the next series. Peace.